Thank you so much. That was a wonderful way to kick off this morning. Now it's my privilege to introduce the President of the European Parliament, the Honorable Jerzy Buzek, a longtime Polish politician, longtime member of the European Parliament, now in this very distinguished position as President of the Parliament. He was with us last year and gave a terrific set of remarks to kick off one of our sessions, and I would like him to do the same this year. So, President Buzek, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. I'm very glad to be here once again. We shared the same 15 minutes with Sir Tom, so probably I should finish immediately. But let me say, it was very impressive. They were very impressive remarks. Well, I can tell you that it is almost whole my life being on the opposite side of the Iron Curtain and having all this experience we're talking about in such an impressive way. So thank you very much. It is really a good beginning for our session, and congratulations to all of you taking part in early bird session and maybe even night owl session. You are fantastic. Maybe Americans are so brave to keep. For me, it's impossible to take part in all the sessions. Thank you very much for the invitation once again. Last March, I gave a speech with the main topic, the United States European Union Strategic Partnership after Lisbon Treaty. 1 month after this speech, in April last year, I went to the United States on the official visit. I met Vice President Biden, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and senior members of the US Congress. My main message in the US was simple. The EU has changed after the Lisbon Treaty, and we are ready to act on the global stage. Something for you as well. Together with the United States, sharing responsibility and giving the basis for global governance. Why was it easier to propose such a partnership 1 year ago and it being still valid today? I'm convinced that after the Lisbon Treaty, it could be important for our American friends. The EU will be much more united in the future, and is even more united now, which means much stronger. At least 2 important reasons led me to this conclusion. The first, I was and I am speaking on behalf of the European Parliament, a more powerful institution thanks to the Lisbon Treaty, in some ways similar to the House of Representatives. With the Council of Ministers of the EU, the upper chamber of our legislative system. This gives a broad and deep democratic accountability, not only to our internal legislation, but also for our external policy. European Parliament giving deep and broad democratic accountability for our external policy. We, as European Parliament, influence external policy through our 36 interparliamentary delegations all over the world, and among which the most important, our transatlantic legislators' dialogue, which you know very, very well, our friends from the American Congress. The second reason for our strategic cooperation to be easier today, we had created the European External Action Service. Let me say that it is a next step in our European integration. And we should also create a real common foreign policy and a real common security and defense policy. It is even written in our treaty. We have it in our Lisbon Treaty. And we should not be afraid to defend our interests, European Union. In trade, in energy security, in foreign policy, we should not be afraid to push for the spread of democracy, for the projection of stability and good governance. This is in all our interests. And we strongly believe is also interest of our neighbors and other countries all over the world. For Europe to continue being relevant in the 21st century, it is not just through the euro, aid and humanitarian assistance. We need to be players and not just payers. This is why our next task has to be build a truly European foreign policy. Let me ask, how can we effectively build a common foreign defense and security policy for the EU? We have to build it on the basis of common actions where we have common goals. The most obvious example is our neighborhood policy. But let me underline that is these regions we also have common goals with the United States all the time. Today, we as the European Union can take responsibility for these regions much more than ever before. Let us remember our European past, not going to details. We remember Marshall Plan, you Americans helping develop economy and also democracy. And the great effort of Americans in helping to dismantle the Iron Curtain and reunite our continent. As John Paul II famously said, it allowed Europe to breathe with both of its lungs. Almost at the same time, the civil war in the Western Balkans, where the Americans were very actively engaged in trying to stop the fighting, together with Europeans. And all the tensions in the Middle East, where America was again engaged in trying to find a peaceful solution as a main player for decades. How do things look like today? By my opinion, some differences. In the Western Balkans, we have opened the gate for EU membership, and our so-called soft power of the European Union changed the picture completely. They had to stop the war, and our basic membership criteria is to create a stable democratic system and a functioning market economy. Croatia, Montenegro, Serbia, and other countries seem to be on a good path for EU membership. We also created an Eastern Partnership strategy. Some of the authors are present in this hall or later on in our discussion. And Euronest, interparliamentary cooperation, for 6 European countries: Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine. Unfortunately, we have observed some backward steps in democracy building in this region, especially in Belarus, and in some ways in Ukraine as well. But we have one very inspiring example, which is Moldova. We still should be optimistic. But certainly our projects and activities, I'm thinking about Europe now, for this region will be very helpful. Our Eastern Partnership continues to be important today, even if our southern neighborhood requires more attention right now. So we should not neglect in the future as well Eastern Partnership. Let me say a few words, therefore, on our third big neighborhood, the countries around the Mediterranean Sea. I have just come from a 5-day visit to Tunisia and Egypt. I walked through Tahrir Square, and when I told the people I was from the EU, for maybe 100 or 200 of them, from point to point, there was a very positive response. I was even surprised. This is a good beginning for our future engagement. But we should know our responsibility. First of all, let's say, most urgent strategy, short distance, immediate strategy, to stop Gaddafi. Humanitarian aid, water, food, medicine, to freeze the assets, and serious sanctions, which are working, really working. Because if we want to build credibility, we must be credible also in this case. Probably the medium-term strategy would be for all the countries. Why it is important as well? Let me say, without strong civic institutions and procedures, democratic institutions and procedures, democracy cannot flourish. We should never forget that democracy cannot be imposed from the outside. It must be their own decision. We should stand ready to support. But it is always possible that in a few years' time, people linked to the current dictatorship could come back to power through democratic means. Well, it has happened in almost all the Central European countries after 4, 5, 6 years. Nothing wrong if our democratic institutions and procedures are working in perfect way. So is our medium-term strategy, very important, but also long-term strategy. Next question, maybe in a few months, but at least in 2 years, of their citizens will be prosperity. So we must be open, except of democracy, on long-term economic partnership with those countries. Liberalization, visa liberalization, small and medium enterprises, smaller and bigger projects, opening our markets step by step. Great deal of work. But if we want to be successful, we must build something like democratic added value. It means prosperity should be linked to democracy, and then we can win for the long-term perspective. And what I'm saying about all of it is important. It's important because, you see, I'm trying to shorten my speech and to finish immediately in few words, but it's not easy, as you see. It's also important, our southern neighborhood, because it means that we have to be both fully engaged in North Africa and the Middle East. I mean both Americans and Europeans, for all the changes in this region. But we also have to be fully engaged, both the EU and the US, in the Israeli and Palestine peace process. Next step, after our full engagement in changes in this region, would be our peace process. So important for our community, European community, because they are our neighbors around the Mediterranean Sea, but for decades also the most important for Americans. As you can see, our joint EU-US engagement in the EU's neighborhood has a new dimension. Europe is taking over a larger share of responsibility. I'm convinced that the presence of the United States and our joint efforts in this area is vital if we wish to achieve success. But on the example of our EU neighbors, we can see how our future strategic partnership could look like for other regions of the world. We may have different opinions on how to solve the world's problems. Americans and Europeans. We speak often about hard versus soft power. But it's good that we may have different opinions, since we sometimes need different solutions to solve problems. But we can act as equal partners because we are committed to the same values. Today, we know that only stability is not enough. Democracy is just as important as stability, because it is the only way to guarantee future prosperity and future long-term stability all over the world. It will be not easy, of course, but I'm quite sure it's a new chapter in our cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. One of the major issues in the last year has been energy,